Okay, welcome everyone. We are live and recording. My name is MJ Mack. I am here with a plethora of wonderful writers. I want to thank you for adjusting to our different method of meeting today. This week, we're going to talk about writing creative nonfiction. And before we go further and introduce our guest speakers, I'm going to ask that everyone mute their mic so that we can cut down on the background noise. And if you have a question, if you will type it in the chat, we will get to your questions as they come along. And without further ado, I will turn this over to Lyndi Allison.
Thank you, Michelle. And I would just like to take a minute to introduce you to our first speaker today. Celia Bassols has been part of Write Along and part of the Word Tour writing workshops, where she's been writing to prompts, and she has now taken her prompts from another source and has been publishing those. So we're excited because she's, expanding her horizons.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. Of course, first thing you hear is horn beeping. Thank you so much for letting me be here. Reedsy is one of the tools that I learned about actually through the workshop, and I am not really published, and so this was one way for me to become published. Every week they say write something within 1,000 to 3,000 words, and then they give you several prompts to choose from. And sometimes nothing speaks to me, and then other times it really works well. I happen to have written two pieces that are nonfiction. One was about Fort Delaware and a Halloween experience that I had, and another one was something there. I was just sitting at the stoplight, and there, here in Panama, there's this real life that goes there. So what happens is that you can have, any day or night, you can have jugglers and somebody selling things, and there's always food to be had. And so I was just sitting there, and the prompt said, okay, describe it using the 5 senses as well as you can. And the way that I go about doing this, and I've been sort of struggling because I think about, I think about what it is that I do when I try to put my keyboard into action, and I try and remember that exact moment where I felt whatever it is that I'm trying to describe on paper. So if at the stoplight, I tried to remember what that mango tasted like that I bought from the vendor. So in doing that and putting myself into that spot, it allows me to come up with the language that I need in order to describe something. So I really literally do just sit for a moment and go, okay, now what was that like? And I can do that when I think about falling in love, because I've been in love before. I think about how it feels when you go dancing and you're feeling great that night. And I try my best to put myself in that spot and bring those words to life. Does that explain it?
Yeah, but would you read us the piece, and you might identify as you go through something that really stood out to you so we can see the creative elements?
Okay, let me see. Okay. So the air outside my car registers a scorching 91 degrees. Nevertheless, there's a team of performers and street vendors standing at the intersection of Via España and the little street with no name that is a shortcut to Calle Samuel Lewis. It's 12 o'clock, and they're all trying to make a buck. Anybody who's been in Panama knows that we have no street signs in Panama City, so that would resonate with anybody who has ever visited here. The waves of heat rise from the asphalt as the 3 lanes of the short block fill with exhaust with exhaust of about 30 cars, dump trucks and motorcycles, many with no mufflers. So, just think about what that's like. And when you see the heat rising, those waves of heat rising off of an asphalt, and you know what it looks like. And, it's just, and so I tried to describe that. Let me see. The air and the heat deters no one. The trio effortlessly meanders through the mix of taxis and trucks with windows wide open and cars with their darkly tinted windows shut tight. Inside my car, it's a very pleasant 82, just enough air so that upon opening my door, I don't swoon from the slap of the air against my face. So, and you know what it's like. You know what it's like when you're in an air-conditioned car and you open that door and the first thing that happens is, especially here in Panama, right? So I tried to describe that. Rolling my window down to hear better, I reflexively reach into my purse, never taking my eyes off the light. The great part about keeping a soft cotton purse is that everything falls to the bottom. It's a colorful sack with a traditional textile called a mola. I feel around for my wallet, finding the hard chiseled edges of my keys. And I try to just describe what it feels like against my fingers when I touch my keys. Then my fingers become entangled with several receipts that I intend to throw away. Men probably don't go through this, but I think women do all the time, unless they're much more neat than I am. And then finally, I retrieve my coin purse and pull a handful of $1 coins called Martinellis and place them on the smooth plastic console. I wonder aloud how they can stand the heat hour after hour, and I know how they will all be there until there's nothing left to sell or they lack the strength to play another note. Just the thought of it makes me perspire, and I redirect my the vent's airstream towards me. Peripulation heaven. I love the chills I get when my damp skin reacts to the sensation of coal across it. However, goosebumps can reach a point where the reaction almost hurts. When that threshold is approaching, I turn the fan back from 5 to 2. Today, a bandoneon player is serenading me. Gosh, I'm sorry, it's serenading me. Anyone looking at the instrument would assume that it is an accordion. Actually, it's a lighter weight cousin that has a hard grill, making it durable even in Panama's hard, humid climate. The exteriors are small and as highly polished as a prize bowling ball. I personally happen to have had people who were bowlers in my family, and I know how important those things were to them. The hot air around us seems to cause notes to hang in the air longer, like it was playing tag with the next musical phrase, trying to catch it. Based on the ballad that he was playing, I would guess his family came from the mountains in the interior, about a 2-hour drive west of the city. The people who created this music peppered it with shouts and whistles that could be heard from one valley to the next. It makes the composition sound like a marvelous combination of yodeling mixed with rueful tales of bravery and sweet-talking apologies for misbehavior. And it's all set to a toe-tapping rhythm. Initially, the chords and the vocals seem at odds with one another. Then the lyric reveals a conversation between a husband and his exasperated wife. He asks how the queen of my home cannot forgive the man who fought the very devil to keep her safe. And the wife responds, "Oh, is that why you've been gone for 3 days and smell like rum?" Hey, it's Panama. When the chorus explodes, I watch the crowd, and everyone within earshot mouths the last lines and smiles. Will she forgive him? Oh, please, yes, because without him, he's a sad, sorry mess. Or, that is a rough translation of it. The Sounds emanating from the combinations of battles and buttons are made possible by the 5 fingers frolicking along the 41 black and white keys. The other hand manages buttons that look like mother of pearl from where I sit. They serve as a lovely contrast to the musician's perfectly polished black nails. My busker is wearing a real Panama hat, a pintado. The clean razor cuts tell me that he's recently been at the barber. His sleeveless muscle shirt fits loosely over his lanky copper body that is yet to fully fill out. On his shoulder and forearm is a tattoo of 3 gigantic rubber trees that I've driven past on the way to the grocery store. He makes his way towards me with his companions in tow. My fellow drivers and I are being beckoned to buy plastic trash bags, 5 in a pack, for $1 from a man whose income is solely based on what he sells daily. I buy a pack, remembering how I'm down to the last 22 bags. Rolling down my window just enough to stick my hand out, I signal and he scurries over. So, you know, in all of these passages, I really have tried to just get you into the car with me so that you also can see the people running around and trying to you know, make $1 and what they look like, and this young man who's very hip and cool, and yet he's a traditional Panamanian with his Panamanian pintado. Let me see. I happily buy a bag. Where is it? And this, okay, according to the paper insert with the blue praying hands and red lettering, his work is being supported by the Catholic Church, where he goes to pick up his daily supply. Bendiciones, señora, he says, handing me the pack of bags in exchange for my Martinelli. I respond automatically, blessings to you, in Spanish, blessings to you, sir, and have a good day. Greeting people civilly has become a habit since I've moved here 4 years ago. Behind him, a lady, then here's the thing that I feel like is emblematic of what we're trying to do in this exercise. Behind me is a lady selling mangoes marinated in hot sauce, salt, and lime. She is reliably at this corner most days wearing traditional Guna blouse, skirt, and headscarf, making her tribal identity clear. I happily buy a bag, and she recognizes me, and her heart-shaped face lights up. She isn't sweating or showing any signs of being overheated. I think to myself, how can she do that? Amazing. The sealed bags of crunchy mangoes have been soaking in lime juice, salt, and chili that wakes up your mouth, nose, and tongue the moment it's opened. Bendiciones, señora, we say to one another as we trade mangoes for money. My eyes follow the pattern of deeply etched lines that cover her face as a result of living under the tropical sun. She blinks slowly and smiles one last time before moving on. I tear open my treat and put a couple of slices of mango in my mouth and let them sit there. The hot sauce this particular woman makes has a slow burn that warms the throat without scorching it. As the sensation begins to fade, I reach for the next bite. The aromatics are subtle, like cumin and cardamom, and the pepper is smoky like an ancho chili. My gums act like a fountain, sending down saliva that's free of any viscosity. The fruit cleanses my vocal cords of any thickness, and I know my voice will be clear and breath fresh for the rest of the day. As I'm congratulating myself for getting so much done at the light, the serenade comes to a crescendo. The change in volume jolts me out of my reverie, and I look up to see fingers moving so fast that they're a blur. He lifts the bandoneon above his head, and the red bellows stretched out to make the final note last, and he bows. Skirting through the rows of cars, he collects his well-earned reward. I give him 2 Martinellis. Bendiciones, señora, he said. I respond in Spanish, thank you. Your music is my blessing. His black eyes shine with appreciation, make it through the next 3 rows of cars before the light turns green again, and he runs back to his post at the intersection of Via España and the little street with no name that is a cut short to Samuel Lewis.
Okay,
So.
so thank you for sharing that with us. And I heard sounds, I smelled smells, I tasted mangoes, you know, those 5 senses that were showing up in the piece that placed me in the car with you. And I recall Michelle commenting on a previous discussion we had about how she, you know, she felt like she was rifling through her purse with the so, you know, we do feel like we're in the car. And then there were also, you know, the literary elements that are creative that you built in. You know, the one that stands out to me is the alliteration, the 5 fingers frolicking along 40 keys, you know, the repetition of the consonant at the start. These are all creative elements. And again, building on something I learned from Michelle, then she's going to get to it about how things don't need to be boring when we write nonfiction. We are now finding that people far more appreciate their nonfiction be shared in a story so that they feel a part of the experience instead of being told about the experience. And you've clearly done that here. So really appreciate you taking the time to share that with us.
So thank you.
Was there anything?
Well, yeah, I will say that I'm very conscious about the alliteration, and it sort of happens when I'm writing, but then when I read it over again and I'm editing, I am very conscious of the fact that that happens naturally, but I like the sound of it. I like the way that my brain hears it when I'm reading, and that is something that I've noticed that I have been doing and have been teaching. Actually, I've been teaching this kid that I've been tutoring. Now I'm doing this and it sounds just great. So it's a good little tool.
Fabulous. Thank you. Very much appreciated. Okay, so I'm just going to switch over to talk a little bit about how you can take a metaphor and then use that metaphor to share with others an experience, a nonfiction experience. So for me, I moved to Panama because I had a few passions. I had really loved Panama's natural spaces when I had visited here. And I also wanted to establish a place where writers could come together and gather and write together and support one another. And we do that here in my Bahia. But an aspect of my writing that I really enjoy is when we take the writing workshops to some of Panama's natural spaces. So we've been to Boquete in the mountains. We've written at a little restaurant locally here, Gaviota, that's right on the beach. A few of us went to Filipina Falls and we hiked to the first 2 waterfalls, and we wrote by the waterfalls. And there's something very fresh about the writing, I find, when you go to natural spaces. So over almost a year ago now, I see this blog was written almost a year ago, I hiked Filipina Falls again. There are actually something like 25 waterfalls there. And I've only been able to access and hike up to 11 of them. But each one has its own unique appearance and its own unique sound. I wanted to go hike this on my own. My husband did not like that idea. So my son came along with me and we hiked the 11 falls. I wore my hiking boots. He hiked it in bare feet. So his experience is probably somewhat different than mine. But we paused at each of the waterfalls and I just made a few notes about my impressions at each of the waterfalls. And then when I came home, I thought about those impressions and what I had learned from the cascading water down the mountains and how it related to my writing. So it was the mushing of my passions. And so this was one of my blogs. So I included a few pictures from our hike with my blog. I started with an introduction to provide some context. So the Filipina Falls hike requires a little scaling and use of ropes, but rewards hikers with several picturesque waterfalls that cascade down a mountain near Syrah, Panama. As I write in these beautiful natural spaces, I enjoy the cool mist on my face, the roar of the water, and the unique rock formations. On my last hike to Filipina, I noticed 3 things about the cascading water that relate to my writing. And so this becomes like a metaphor for how I'm writing. And just because I would really love for you to hear the sound, I'm going to play a short part of the video. So that is just one of the 11 falls. That's one of the taller ones, but that gives you a sense of the sound that you hear. So the first point that I made, after giving an introduction, I shared 3 points about things that I had learned. And the first thing that I realized when I observed is that water finds the lowest point. So I wrote that water finds crevices and holes as it meanders downward on a path to the lowest level. I once submitted a short story for feedback to science fiction writer Robert Sawyer, who's one of my favorite authors, when he was a writer in residence at a Toronto library. He told me to keep writing about grief, addiction, and mental health, to write the tough stuff. I took his advice, and years later, I write flash fiction, personal essays, and young adult novellas, offering hope in the midst of people's lowest moments. I don't have to look hard and long for the low points in people's lives, including my own, Our challenges and vulnerabilities make us human, and writing about them becomes therapeutic. Eventually, my thoughts run clearer, like the rivers flowing down mountains bring refreshment. There's another glimpse of one of the waterfalls. So I tried to select a few pictures that related to the point I was making. So that first high waterfall, finding the lowest point. The second point I made was water flows under, over, around, and through obstacles. When water encounters obstacles, it flows under, over, around them. These obstacles determine whether the waterfall will be a narrow or wide stream, multiple streams, or layered streams, giving each waterfall its own unique beauty and sound. If you've written for any length of time, you'll have encountered obstacles. Days when the words need to be chiseled out of stone. You receive rejections or sales are low. These challenges, as well as life circumstances, can discourage you, but finding a way to overcome them ultimately determines your success. Another little glimpse into the reading and so on. So the third point that I made is that water carves a niche. So I thought that this waterfall illustrated that because of how it shifts in direction and goes around things and then carves out a path. And for me, this is something that we often share and write along. And that is that while we share our author journeys are different and we need to find our own niche. So this became an important point for me because it's something that we live out well here. Water carves a niche. As water finds its lowest point and works around obstacles, it carves out a niche through the soil, foliage, and rocks. This is also true of writers. While we glean insights from other authors and their journeys, our path is unique to us, and thus so is our niche. Authors approach writing in many ways. I find the lowest point in, okay, so that was my third point, and then the last thing I do in my nonfiction article is this little bit of a conclusion. Authors approach writing in many ways. I find the lowest point in people's lives, deal with obstacles when I encounter them, and like water, carve out my own niche. And just as Philippine Falls provides beautiful natural spaces for hikers and writers, I hope I reward readers too by writing compelling stories. And so, I know, like Celia has found a way to write a nonfiction piece with a prompt. I found one by taking an experience and just writing my impressions during my experience, and then choosing 3 points that I could make to relate the waterfalls in a comparison to writing. So in a form of an extended metaphor. So those are 2 forms of coming up with nonfiction writing. This one for my blog. And my reason for sharing it is because that's my authentic self, who I am, and it speaks to who I am and why I set up my writing business the way that I have. So I wanted to have that on my blog so that people could catch a glimpse, and if it resonated with them, you know, they might like to be a part of this as well. So now Michelle is going to take us away from blogs to writing newsletters. So Michelle, a great writer who writes both great fiction and nonfiction.
It's a little hard to follow up after Lyndi and Celia because they are both such magnificent writers. But I'm going to share just a few tips for those of you that write newsletters, because believe it or not, they have to have creative elements as well. So let's talk about newsletters. I don't know about how many that you get, but my attention span is about that of a gnat when I get them. So if that newsletter doesn't capture me right away, I'll be honest, I hit the delete button. I don't go all the way through it. So it's got to hit me right then and there, smack me between the eyes in the first 3 sentences, or it goes in the trash can. You need to think about your newsletter as a little tap on the shoulder to your subscriber that says, hey, don't forget about me. I'm still here. I'm your favorite writer. And it should serve as a recap of what's been happening, or as a coming soon about what you're going to communicate to your subscribers, to your social media channels as we go. So my newsletters are broken up into 5 sections. And I'm going to start with the first one, which I call the Dear Mom section. Dear Mom. And then I plant the emotion. I use the 5 senses to impart information, and I'm going to go through these in a little deeper detail. Section 2 is the Cool Kids Club. It's the important news. Section 3 is where I'm going to evoke the emotion of the season. Lyndi, can I have the next slide? Section 4 is where I share information and I give the subscriber a solution to something that I planted in the beginning without them knowing it. And then I tick and tie it to section 5, which is the call to action, where again, I'm going to evoke emotion. I'm going to give a call to action. I'm going to give my subscribers homework, and I'm going to use humor and the 5 senses. So our next slide. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper. So this is my opening paragraph in my newsletter that comes out on Friday. So in yellow, I'm going to give subscribers in this opening paragraph a little tidbit of information that they may not have known. I'm not going to force feed it to them, but I'm going to tell them that November is National Novel Writing Month. Unless you're an author, you do not know that it happens, but it's planted it. It's a Jeopardy question. I've planted a Jeopardy answer in their brain. Then I'm going to find ways to invoke the 5 senses. So if you see that in green, I talk about the yellow legal pad with blue writing going neatly down the page, the sound of the scratching of my pen, the lemony smelling furniture polish, and the apple juice and cinnamon. You smell that even though you don't have, you know what the lemony smelling furniture polish, everybody knows what that smells like. Then I'm going to go to my ears, cue the horror music. I'm going to cue my vision. It fits nicely in a gift bag with some tissue paper or a small box with a stick-on bow. We know visually what that looks like. Don't be afraid to be funny in your newsletters. Newsletters can be so dry. Be funny, be authentic, as Lyndi says. I'm the girl who adds things to the list just to check them off. I am that person. I really, really am. Don't open the door. It's a trap. That's when we're cueing the horror music. I've added in that little bit of humor. And then I try to end that opening paragraph with another piece of humor that says, ooh, now you're intrigued. See, I am a great mystery writer, because then that reminds my subscriber, hey, she's got books out. Make sure she reads, make sure I order them. And then I tried to foreshadow something in my opening paragraph that's going to happen the next month. And that's going to try to keep my subscribers coming to be curious about what's going to be happening next month. And next month, we're actually going to be talking about Jolla Buckaflood, which is a mouthful. So, Lyndi, will you switch us to the next slide? Oh, wait a minute. And I'm sorry. You want to evoke emotion, both good and bad. And it's okay to invoke bad emotion. Don't skirt away from it. The emotions that I'm hitting in this opening paragraph are, there's only 2 months of the year left. The clock is at warp speed. So I'm getting that anxiety. I'm creating anxiety for the subscriber. Don't forget the prep list and the cleaning of the house list, and cross-check that to the grocery list. Again, more urgency, more anxiety. Oh God, now I need to go buy a festive outfit, because I've got that cookie exchange. And then I try to lighten it up. Oh, I'm going to leave you with a teaser. So I've created this ball of anxiety, and then I go, oh, but it's okay. All right, so if we can go to the next one. There we go. So I impart a little more information in section 2. Did anybody know that Friday is Love Your Lawyer Day? It is. I had 12 lawyers on retainer at one point in my work life, and I actually found out National Love Your Lawyer, and I would send them things on Love Your Lawyer Day. And I'm teasing people in section 2 with the tidbit about my new book that has just come out. And I'm giving that little bit of humor. Lawyers who haven't sued anyone in a week, sink your teeth into it. And then again, trying to find ways to invoke the 5 senses. Their teeth are beginning to gnash. You can hear that in your ear. Okay, we can go to the next one. And then I'm very lucky, and this was planned when I wrote my series, so that it would tie in to my newsletters. My books all contain cocktails. So I include in my newsletter a seasonal cocktail. So my cocktails for the fall, this one happens to be maple syrup cider. Doesn't that sound delicious? We're going to do a video about it soon. But I want to keep my subscribers entertained while invoking the sense of the emotions of the season. So in December, I'm going to be doing my recipe for making a French 75. And then in January, I'm doing one for a mulled cider. In the summer, I'm doing my more beachy drinks, my sapina coladas, my summer umbrellas. So I try to gear that section to the season. And that was very deliberate as I created my newsletters. All right, and then we have our next slide. Play on the emotions you have planted throughout the newsletter. So remember when I said in the beginning, I created the sense of anxiety in the first section of my newsletter with emotion and list making, and there's only 2 months and warp speed. Now I've planted the seed that TikTok, they need to get busy. So I'm giving them a solution, and I'm going to tell them how to overcome this problem, because in the beginning of my newsletter, I talk about gift giving, and it's time to buy all these gifts, and oh my gosh, and it's almost the end, and I got to get it done, and what am I going to do? Oh, I have a solution for you. And here are my solutions. Here are some people that you can buy their books for your friends and family. Only 2 months left, warp speed. Don't forget, I need, I agonize. Again, I'm creating that emotion, and then I'm going to give them the solution. So what happens next? Well, then I've taken them on this roller coaster, hopefully, of a newsletter, which generally, do know this, people spend 5 seconds reading a newsletter. They scroll through it, and unless they're engaged, again, they're going to hit delete. So keep it short, keep it pithy, keep it fun, invoke those 5 senses. So again, as I've said in the beginning, I give them a tidbit of information that they didn't know. 4.3 million books are published each year. In this section, I'm also giving them, this is my ending section, I'm giving the subscriber a job. I've given them a challenge. Buy a book from an independent author, write a review. I've given them homework. And don't be afraid to be funny. Stephen King and John Grisham and Kristen Hanna don't need your money. I need your money. In fact, buy 2 books, one to give and one for yourself. But hey, if you want to buy more, I'm not stopping you. Really, really and truly. And then I end it with, and there's a list about a list about a list. So again, giving some levity. Play on the emotions of your newsletter. I know you have a ton of things to put on your never-ending to-do list. Oh God, there's that anxiety again. I've done it again. I've given them that anxiety, but then I'm kind of giving them an out. Take a chance. Why not? What do you have to lose? Now, I screwed up at the end of this newsletter. I forgot to add my 5 senses. So I have to go back in on this newsletter and see what I can plug in with my 5 senses. So that's my homework for today, is to plug the 5 senses that Celia and Lyndi are so good about putting in their writings. With Celia's writing, I felt my thighs sticking to the seat because it was so hot. I really did. With Lyndi's writing piece about the waterfalls, I heard the waterfalls. I smelled the foliage. I felt the humidity. So even though this is not a blog or a piece of nonfiction writing, your newsletters have to still contain that information if you're going to keep your subscribers engaged. And then I say thank you. Because if they've got, and I say, well, kids, if you've scrolled this far, thank you. Because that means they've actually read the entire newsletter. My own mother doesn't read the entire newsletter. If I can get my mom to read the newsletter, and that's key. My mom is my biggest critic. If I can't capture my mom in the first paragraph, and she tells me she didn't read anything past the first paragraph, then I know that I screwed up my newsletter. And I have to go back and tweak the next one so that it will resonate with my subscribers. So our last slide, because you know, guys, I love a slideshow. To wrap it up, share tidbits of little known information. And what we're going to learn in this month's newsletter, if you're one of my subscribers, is you're going to know about National Lawyers Day. You're going to know about 4.3 million writers, and you're going to know about, oh gosh, what was it? That November was National Novel Writing Month. Those are the 3 teeny tiny tidbits. And it wasn't a long sentence. It was like that big. But now you've got that Jeopardy question planted in your head. Don't be afraid to foreshadow into next month's news. Give them a teaser. Make them want to read next month's news. Find ways, as we've said earlier today with both Celia and with Lyndi, invoke the 5 senses. People are geared to that. If they can smell the cinnamon, if they can feel the heat. When Celia wrote about the mangoes that had been dipped in the salt and the lime, I could taste them. So it's very, very key to do that. And going back to the tidbits of little known information, Celia was excellent in her piece, her nonfiction piece, because having lived in Panama for 2 years, there were things that I didn't know what they were, but because of her piece with the information that she imparted as she was writing this story, now I know what things are called. So please don't be afraid to throw in that tidbit of information. It's really important. Don't be afraid to be funny. Be human, be authentic. You all know me, I am a cut up. And that's what my subscribers expect because my books are cut up. My social media posts are funny. So that's who my authentic self is. Invoke emotion, good and bad. It's okay to do bad emotion. It's okay to create anxiety because I guarantee you it's not always unicorns and butterflies in your subscribers' world or in your world. So be human. And then play to the seasons using your five senses. So I promised I would keep this short and sweet because I know sometimes mine can get really, really long. So now you know more than you ever wanted to know about how to creatively write a newsletter, and I will send it over to Lyndi.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. That was excellent. And I'd like you to know that I love receiving your newsletters. Sitting back with something fruity to drink, or if it's in the morning, a coffee, and getting right to the very end, because you do those things and you do hold my interest. So we'd like to give you an opportunity to practice. And one of the ways that we often practice in both our write along group and in the writing workshops is by giving you a prompt. So I have pulled a short phrase out of Celia's nonfiction piece to give to you. This is one way you can find a prompt. Just read a piece and take a short phrase and then write to it. This time when you write to it, I'm going to ask you to write a nonfiction piece. You can write nonfiction and include those creative elements. So we're going to write for 10 minutes and then we're going to pause, and instead of reading right away like we normally do in a writing workshop, we're going to give you a few more minutes to go back and add in some of those creative elements that may not have come out in your raw writing. So our nonfiction phrase that we are going to write to from Celia's piece is, nevertheless, there is. Nevertheless, there is. So please take the time to write for 10 minutes, and we will pause here to give you the chance to do that. Finish up that last sentence. And now Michelle is going to make a few suggestions on some of the things that you can consider about what you've just written. And you can take a few minutes to build those things into the piece that you've written.
Okay, so now that we've written our piece, I want you to look at it like a sandwich. Yes, I know, I'm food oriented, I'm starving. Let's see what we can layer in to make what you've written more delicious. Are there any aspects of the five senses, sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch, that you can add in to spice it up? Get it? Spice it up. Is there a mood that you can evoke in your piece to convey to the reader? Is there an emotion? Are there words that you can use to make the reader feel happy, sad, angry, or nostalgic? And then I want you to think about metaphors or similes that you could add into your piece. A ray of sunshine, laughter is infectious, a blank canvas, a roller coaster of emotion, a symphony of melody. And now I want you to look at it and find ways to describe the atmosphere in your piece. Celia is very good because we were planted right beside her in the car. So go back and think about what she wrote because we were sitting right beside her in the hot car. We felt the air when we left the car slap us in the face. So think about that atmosphere and think about how you can sandwich the five senses, mood, emotion, metaphors or similes, and atmosphere into your piece.
Okay, just take another 30 seconds or a minute I know that's hardly enough time to fully craft your nonfiction piece, but you'll get a sense of how you've been able to do that even in this short time. Michelle, if you want to lead us in this part about what people have written.
Okay, do I have any volunteers? Chaska?
Thank you. Nevertheless, there is always another situation. When I think I am kind, thoughtful, and preparing to receive someone wonderfully, there is always an additional point of view, a person hanging in the back, pissed as hell. So perhaps I should drop everything and take a look, but usually the movement is forward and on the next thing, next level, next moment. That anxiety of focusing or moving forward reminds me of desperately moving forward on all hands and knees, quickly, automatically. There is just, excuse me, in a train in India, there is just one instant to be on the floor cleaning with one's body and self. Going to anchor on the train is filthy, trashed. Feces all over the tracks, and the train cars were full of dirt, dust, and anything you could think of throwing away. Pulling into a station, climb, the discapacitados climb onto the train using all fours and crawl under the seats, their cheeks scraping the floor, arms out like a butterfly, scooping up all the trash, dust, and dirt, knees and feet splayed and flat and pushing forward, under all the seats front to back, then out the door. But who is back in the shadows, raiding, roiling, stewing, evaluating to pull up those cards to deal out at any fine future family gathering?
Very nice.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to provide feedback for Shaska? Anything that stands out to them?
The sweeping motion with the butterflies captured me.
It was so shocking.
I felt transported to another place, to another culture that I had yet to experience. And I was like, what? You know, so I wanted to learn more.
Anyone else? Does anyone else have a piece they want to share?
I can share more, I guess. It's a little funnier, it's a little lighter. But I really liked what you did, Jessica. But nevertheless, there is that damn parakeet again. I know it's her because she has a ridge of yellow feathers that are growing in the wrong direction down the middle of her face. She likes to bite off my blossoms if I don't have her banana slices ready in the morning when she visits. The little bitty looks right at me, walks over to my Mickey Mouse tree, and snaps off a bloom, looking at me defiantly. That's no way to get treats from me, Missy, I say. She responds with a series of screeches that hurt my ears. Really, I'm not rewarding your behavior, go. She flies away, sailing up via Argentina over to the monkey pod tree that is filled with bright orange blossoms. I retreat into my kitchen, satisfied, only to hear that she has returned with company. I'll never win.
I love that.
Oh, that's perfect.
Well, it happens to me every day. that turkey comes and visits me every day.
That's so cool.
Very cheeky. Does anybody have any feedback they'd like to share? I love the cheekiness of the piece. It was very light, and I can see this ongoing issue that Celia is having with this very tiny little 1 pound parakeet. And I'm sorry, the parakeet is winning.
She does every day. She does every day.
Yeah, but it's a great piece that demonstrates the conflict, right? The human against nature, if you will. And the glimpses into like all of the blossoms and, you know, the sound of the bird and, you know, the bird's going to go away, but guess what? That bird's coming back and he's bringing his friends. Nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Love that.
Anyone else? Well,
Did you want to add something, Shaska? I feel like we both started to talk at the same time and you might have had something. you
No, you said just what I was thinking with Celia's piece, and I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and it has that little bit, it's got the humor, but it also, you know, goes in one direction. And then of course the bird comes back. And I noticed Shaska did something similar. She's at this family event and all planned and has all of these.
Mhm.
But there's always someone in the background who's pissed as hell. You know?
Right, right. Yeah, that it actually that line made me very curious. I should have said something, yeah, like who is that person in the background pissed as hell.
Well, I loved your piece about the parrot because they have such character and strength and focus, and they're so much smarter than people think. Because I used to have a parrot when I was little from Mexico, and your parrot coming back with the troops, and
Yes, and that's exactly right.
and you're not going to cover it with a net because you enjoy the engagement. So I love that.
Yeah, yeah, it is my company. You're right.
But you're enjoying your garden without a net. You're enjoying your view without a net. And these are the come along with it that add a lot of richness.
Yes,
It's,
yes.
Lyndi, you want to take it from there?
So, you know, it's okay to write a telling statement, you know, to start, just to get it down if it's coming out in a rush, and then to go back, you know. So give yourself permission to put something on the page. It's always easier to edit and craft something than it is to go to a blank page and go, you know, what am I going to write? You know? Okay, so thank you, everyone, for participating. Was there, just before I go, was there anyone else who was dying to read who didn't get a chance to read? Michelle or John or Tracy at all?
No, I'm not dying to read, but I really appreciate this class, though. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate you guys.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that both
So do I.
Lyndi and MJ and Michelle put a tremendous amount of work into these, and I do appreciate them
so
a
do I.
lot.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just glad I'm not one of the lawyers that Michelle worked with who might misbehave and are now on a cruise and, you know, a sleaze on the seas, and their behavior might factor into that somehow. So I'm feeling at peace right now. I did.
I don't know if Michelle knows that I'm a former lawyer. Who
I
knows?
do know. That's why I was a little worried.
Well, now I know too.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
We'll forgive you.
humor about who we are and what's happened. All right, so thank you everyone for coming, and I look forward to seeing you at the next ride along. It's been a lot of fun as usual, as we learn together and as we write together, and you know, we grow together and share and encourage one another to move forward with our writing.